This is Sean for TightPoker.com, and we're back once again with another hand history review video. And this time we're doing 25 no limit, and a really good guy. His name's Kevin, and he goes by the name Prof Kevin 85. He sent in some hand histories playing 25 no limit, which was the limit I started playing at. And it's a good limit because at 10 no limit and below, you really get some of the weird, drunk, random people that play unexplainable poker. And I always thought at 25 no limit is really where it kind of started to begin to be somewhat rational. And although the mistakes are huge, it wasn't just like, oh, I've got 6-4 offsuit, I'm going to shove. Not to say that doesn't happen at 100 and 200 no limit, which it does. I've seen it. But 25 no limit for a beginner, if you can bankroll yourself and start there, you'll save yourself a lot of frustration. Anyways, let's get right into it. So here he is, kings on the small blind. And the button, 64-16, limps right in. So clearly 3 betting big, and well above 225. I think about $3 is appropriate here, which is what we see. So good job. And we get a call behind. So at this point, I mean, his limp call is 86, but he didn't limp. He min raised, and so he min raised called on the button, which I don't know. It's kind of one of those speculative hands or a monster like aces or queens, I guess. So 3-8-5, and with kings here, obviously we're betting and betting big for value, and that's what we see here. Good job. And he flats. Okay, so at this point, I'm really curious. Like, it's like, okay, come on. You've shown all sorts of aggression, and your opponent has had no problems with it whatsoever. So either he's just the absolute station of a lifetime, or he's slow playing a big hand. The queen comes, and I guess it's just time to get it in, which you do. And he flipped over queens. So yeah, it's just one of those hands that kind of played itself. I don't have any problems with the way you played it. He just drew out on the turn, and he played this just really, really stupid. So yeah, nothing to do there. You've got ace-8 mid-position, and so we get an early limper, and you isolate. And ace-8 suited in the hijack in the 6-max game might be a little early. I know you play a little aggressive, a 1916 style over these, how many hands you have, I guess 700. But this might be a little on the too aggressive side for me, just because of the positioning of everything here. But let's just see how it turned out. Small blind calls, and that guy limp folds, which is hilarious. So all unders, and I mean, usually paired boards are really good to see bet. Unfortunately, when it's like 2-2-5, no one's going away with anything because, well, they have overs. And so he checks, and you bet. So I wouldn't have really see bet here and just waited for a good scare card to come on the turn. And predictably, he goes nowhere. So you picked up a draw now and an overcard. So now is a good time to bet. And the pot wouldn't have been quite as big to charge you for your draw, essentially. But you do have some fold equity. So he checks again, and you fire again, only the amount seems pretty small. And this might be an indicator that you're giving yourself the right price to draw to your flush, but I think a bigger bet there might have taken it down. And so he min raises you. So at this point, I mean, are you getting pot odds? Pretty much. So I think this is an automatic call. And you hit your flush, and so that's all good news. And I kind of have a feeling he might have been on the same draw. And he bet small, and so certainly you're raising this up. And this is the interesting thing that you got to do is gauge, how much can he raise that, yes, he's going to call you, so the bad hands, don't fold out. But at the same time, there is a chance he has a better hand and he has a boat. So the boat's going to raise you every time no matter what. It's not one of those, well, a better hand will call you also. So you just shove. Maybe this was a villain-specific read, but I might have just, popped it to 15 or something like that. But he actually called, so with trips. So, okay, fair enough. Kind of a weird hand. It's hard to explain that one, but definitely looked like a villain-specific play. And I guess we've just kind of seen this guy. This is the way he plays his big hands. He just calls. No matter what, he's never really showing too much aggression. All right, you got King Queen suited under the gun in a 5-handed game. This should be, if at the very bottom of your range here, playing under the gun. At least when I played 6 max at 25 no limit and even 50 no limit too, I was just so ridiculously tight, which was successful for me playing under the gun, just because the position's just so terrible. And King Queen suited is one of those hands where it's like, it looks hot, but usually is not. So I might not have opened here. I might have just folded this. But you go ahead and make an open, and I'm sure the fact that it was 5-handed played a part into this decision process, which is perfectly fine. So, that scenario played out where you had a caller behind you. He is a loose passive, but you've flopped really, really well here. You have an overcard, top pair, and a flush draw to the second nut. So, really couldn't have, flopped too much better unless you had flopped the nuts. So, the c-bet size here, I think, is what you're trying to do, is keep the villain in the hand. And here's what I see. I see a 39.51, or I guess even 1.5. And it's not a particularly horrible board, but that's a c-betting board every time. And you look at his fold to c-bets, and it's 41%. So this is a guy who's just not going away. He's just going to call you down. And if that's the case, you need to get value for your hand because he's going to pay you off. So I don't like the c-bet size. I have a feeling what you were doing is just trying to keep him in the hand because you knew you had a big hand. And it did work, but I think, a bet to 125, 150 would have gotten the job done, and the 150 would have been the appropriate bet amount here. The 9 probably didn't change anything unless he had a really sick hand like Jack 10 and decided to call a gut shot. But outside of that, he should be pretty good here. 275, and he calls. And so unfortunately, your hand didn't improve. And at this point, he hasn't gone away, and you've got top pair, second best kicker, and nothing else. So I'm not in love with your hand at this point anymore. And hopefully, you're not shoving or doing anything kind of wacky like that, because this guy's just not going away at this point. And we see his went to showdowns 37%, which is ridiculously high. So this is a pure calling station 100% of the time. So it's a tricky spot you're in here because, if you check and he bets, you're hoping he doesn't bet too big. But at the same time, blah, blah, blah. So let's just see what happens. You go ahead and check, and I think you're in check call mode, which is kind of where I was thinking. And he half pots it. And this is crappy. There's just so many hands that beat you, especially any hand with a 10. If he had something like 8-10 or even Queen 10, which would explain his kind of behavior in this hand really well, or even pocket 10s, you're crushed. So we're never raising, obviously. 100% of the time, never raising. And this is actually a really tough call, and there's a good case to be made for laying it down. You go ahead and call, which I don't think is horrible, but it sucks because what are you ahead of here? What are you ahead of? Like ace 8, maybe ace 9, but he wouldn't have, so yeah, 9-10. So definitely explainable behavior that on the turn and river, I'm not sure what he was doing pre-flop with 9-10 offsuit and the cutoff and calling just a absolutely weird gut shot c-bet, but just kind of one of those hands. All right, pocket 8s in the cutoff, and you make your raise, which is fine against a 150, but we only have 11 hands, so we will see. Another loose passive. Wow, it looks like 25 no limit 6 max has a ton of loose passive fish. It looks like a very profitable place to be playing. And a call. So 429 with pocket 8s. Unfortunately, you didn't get the button here, and any two overcards with these two guys, they're definitely calling. They're not going away. So